When I first heard it, I thought it was the wind. A low, dragging sound outside my cabin door, then a heavy thump, and another, like something enormous shifting its weight in the dark. I froze. Out here, in the Montana mountains, you learn the difference between wind, trees, and something alive. This wasn't wind. This was breathing, slow, deep, too heavy for a deer, too steady for a moose, and the way the boards under the porch creaked. God, my throat went dry, my knees locked. I knew this wasn't a deer. For a second, I didn't even breathe. The fire in the stove had burned low, throwing long, nervous shadows across the room. I reached over and killed the lantern. The darkness wrapped around me like a coffin. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear the blood in my ears. Then it happened, a sound that still makes my skin crawl when I think of it. A long, slow exhale, close, right outside the wall where I sat. My first thought, bear. And out here, that's the one visitor you pray you never get, especially alone, at midnight, in a wooden cabin that might as well be made of paper if a grizzly decides it wants in. I eased toward the window, slow as a ghost. My hands were slick with sweat. Every step creaked, and I felt like even the mountains were listening. When I reached the glass, I tilted just enough to look outside, and that's when I saw it. A massive shape in the moonlight, rising like a shadow with weight. It wasn't moving fast, it wasn't in a hurry, but its presence, God help me, it felt deliberate. The silver light from the half-moon poured over its back, and for a second, I couldn't breathe at all. It was a bear, a full-grown grizzly, easily 8, maybe 9 feet if it stood up. Its fur looked almost blue under the moon, and it wasn't passing by. It wasn't looking for berries or sniffing around for scraps. It was looking at me, right through the glass. Its head low, shoulders like moving boulders, steam curling from its nostrils into the cold night. I swear the temperature dropped inside the cabin just seeing those eyes. Yellow, deep, but not empty. They burned with something I didn't understand, something more than hunger. I should have backed away, grabbed the rifle on the rack, barricaded the door. That's what you do out here. You don't hesitate when it comes to grizzlies. But I didn't move. Because those eyes, they weren't wild in the way I expected. They weren't flat, or blank, or raging like every warning poster says. They were fixed on me like it knew me. And that thought, God, that thought hit me so hard I almost laughed out loud just to keep from losing my mind. Knew me? I'd been alone out here for months. I don't know bears. Bears don't know me. That's how it works. That's the rule. And yet, I couldn't shake it. It wasn't just staring. It was searching. Like there was a question in those eyes. Or maybe an answer. My pulse was hammering in my throat so hard I thought I'd pass out. I gripped the window frame so tight my knuckles went white. My breath fogged the glass. And then, God help me, it took one slow step closer. Its paw landed on the porch with a dull thud I felt in my chest. The boards groaned under its weight. The glass between us suddenly felt like tissue paper. If it wanted me, I was done. And yet, I didn't reach for the gun, because in that moment, something in me whispered, don't. Not fear, not survival instinct. Something else. Something I can't explain even now. Maybe it was those eyes. Maybe it was the way the moon caught on a scar running along its foreleg. A scar I'd seen before. A scar I'd made sure healed. That's when the bottom dropped out of my stomach. My God, it can't be. Not here, not now, not after all these months. But I knew. I knew because no one forgets eyes like that. Not even a man who's tried to bury every piece of the past in silence. The bear huffed once, steam rolling from its nose, then it lowered its head, and for a heartbeat, the world narrowed to that single look. And I swear to you, in that silence, I felt the weight of something I couldn't name. Gratitude, memory, or maybe judgment. I don't know. All I know is this. I thought this was how it ends. A grizzly on my porch, midnight in the mountains, no one around to hear the screams. But then I saw its eyes, and I froze because they looked familiar. You ever hear a sound so desperate it crawls inside your bones? A sound that makes you move before your brain even catches up? That was the day everything started, months back, deep in the timberline, late spring. I'd gone out with an axe, planning to clear deadfall near the creek. Snow was melting, earth soft and loud under my boots. I was halfway down the slope when I heard it. A cry, not a bird, not a fox. This was different, high-pitched, broken, like something trying to hold on to life and losing fast. I froze. Out here, any cry like that can mean trouble. Predator, trap, maybe worse. I followed the sound, heart hammering, boots sliding in the slush, every instinct screaming to turn back. But I couldn't. It was like that cry had hooked itself under my ribs and was dragging me in. And then I saw it. A cub. Small, maybe 6 months old, tangled in an illegal snare set by some bastard who didn't care what he caught. Its paw was shredded raw, bone almost showing, blood soaking into the snow like ink. But what stopped me cold wasn't the wound. It was the way it looked at me. God help me, it didn't snarl, didn't lunge, didn't fight. It just froze, eyes wide, wet, dark as midnight, and they locked on mine. And I swear on everything, those eyes weren't wild in that moment. They were begging. I dropped to my knees before I knew what I was doing. My hands shook as I reached for the trap. The steel jaws were rusted and biting deep into the flesh. Every second I hesitated was another second it bled out. I remember whispering, like an idiot, "It's okay, I'm here." Like words could mean anything to a creature that should have ripped me apart, but it didn't. It just stared, breathing in these quick, shallow bursts, trusting me for reasons I'll never understand. I got my knife out, fingers numb, and pried the spring until my palms split. The jaws snapped open with a metallic scream, and the cub jerked free, collapsing hard in the snow. Its paw, Jesus, torn to hell. I thought it wouldn't make it another hour. I could have left, should have left. That's what the books tell you. Don't interfere. Let nature run its course. But rules don't mean a damn thing when something looks at you like that, like you're the only thing standing between it and the dark. So I scooped it up, a ball of fur and blood, heavier than it looked, trembling so bad I felt the shakes through my chest. It didn't fight, didn't claw, just pressed its head against me, like it had given up everything except that one last gamble. I hauled it back to the cabin, every step a war against my own fear. If its mother was out there, she'd tear me in half before I took the next breath. But I never saw her, never heard her, just silence, and that cry still echoing in my skull. Back at the cabin, I cleaned the wound with what I had, boiled water, strips of old cloth, shaking hands. It whimpered once, a sound so soft I thought my heart would split. I fed it scraps, cooked meat, a little milk warmed by the fire. It ate like life was pouring back into it bite by bite, and through it all, those eyes never left me. Not once. I don't know how long I sat there, talking to it like some broken fool. You're gonna make it. You hear me? You're gonna live. And when the bleeding slowed and its breathing steadied, I whispered the words that haunt me now. Go, little one. Live. And it did. After 3 days, 3 days of me patching, feeding, praying, it limped to the tree line, turned once, and vanished into the pines without a sound. No drama, no goodbye, just gone, like smoke in the wind. I stood there a long time, staring at the spot where it disappeared, telling myself that was the end. I'd done my part. Nature would take it from there, and for a while, I believed that. But here's what no one tells you, not in books, not in all the years I spent in the wild. Nature doesn't forget. It should have charged by now. That's what my mind kept screaming as I stood frozen at the window, staring at a wall of fur and muscle under the moonlight. Every survival instinct I'd learned in 50 years told me the same thing. A grizzly this close is death waiting to happen. But it didn't move. Not the way I expected. It stood there, silent, breathing heavy, yes, but not with rage, not even with hunger. It was watching me, studying me like a man might read a letter written in a language he half remembers. And that's when my heart tripped over itself, because I saw the truth. This wasn't the little cub I'd carried in my arms, weak and bleeding. That was months ago. That cub was gone. This was something else now. An animal carved out of the wild, massive shoulders rolling under a pelt, thick as shadows, claws like ivory scythes catching the pale light. It had grown into everything nature intended it to be, and yet it had come here, to me. Why? Why after all this time? Why now? I tried to swallow, but my throat felt like glass. My voice was a ghost in my chest. I didn't dare speak, didn't dare move, because then I saw it, and it stopped my heart cold. Blood, not old, not faded into the fur, fresh, wet, dark as ink under the moon, smears across its shoulder, streaks down its flank. The scent hit me a moment later, iron and earth, sharp enough to make me gag. I gripped the windowsill so hard the wood bit into my palms. 100 thoughts detonated in my skull all at once. Had it killed? Was it hurt? Both? If it was wounded, it might be desperate, cornered. A cornered bear is a death sentence. But if that blood wasn't its own, God, what had it done? Then it shifted. One slow, deliberate step forward, its paw landing on the porch with a thud that traveled up my spine. Another step, and another, closing the distance like a ghost rolling downhill. Every board under its weight groaned in protest. I couldn't move, couldn't even blink. My chest was a fist, my lungs refusing air. All I could do was watch as it came closer, closer, until its face filled the window, steam curling from its nostrils, eyes locked on mine. And that's when I saw something else, something hanging from its mouth. At first, my mind refused to name it, just a dark shape, swinging gently from those jaws. But then the moonlight shifted, silver washing over metal, and the breath in my body died. It wasn't meat, it wasn't bone, it was a trap, a snare, twisted and broken, its steel jaws gaping like some dead thing's grin, rusted teeth glinting in the night. Blood still dripping from the springs. My blood ran cold, because I knew that trap. Not that exact one, but its kind. I'd seen it before, clenched around a cub's paw, biting into soft flesh while it cried for a mother that never came. And now, here it was again. Not on the bear's leg, not cutting into its body. No, this time, the bear had carried it, dragged it God knows how far through the mountains. To me. I staggered back from the glass like it had reached through and grabbed me by the throat. My mind was a storm of voices, none of them making sense. Why bring it here? Why show me this? What the hell was I looking at? The bear lowered its head, letting the trap clatter onto the porch. The sound, a cold, hollow clang, echoed through the night like a gunshot. And then, silence, just the sound of my own heartbeat, ragged and too loud, threatening to shake me apart. It looked at me then, really looked. And I swear to God, if you put 1,000 years between that moment and now, I'd still feel the weight of that stare. It wasn't rage, it wasn't fear, it was something older, something heavier, gratitude, warning, memory, maybe all three, tangled together in a language I'll never understand. I thought it was over when the trap hit the porch, thought it would turn and vanish into the dark like before, but it didn't. It stayed, still as a carved statue, eyes burning through the glass, breath fogging in the cold, waiting. For what? I couldn't tell. All I knew was this: whatever was coming, This was only the beginning, and if I'd known what it was waiting for, what the night still held in its black hands, I would have locked every door and prayed harder than I've ever prayed in my life. The trap hit the porch with a clang that cut straight through me. Cold steel glinting under the moonlight, blood still wet on its jaws. And that sound, it didn't just echo off the mountains. It echoed inside me, like a warning bell. For a long moment, neither of us moved. The bear stood there, head low, breath steaming in the bitter air, and I swear every hair on my arm stood up. My cabin suddenly felt too small, too fragile. The glass between us, a joke. But then my eyes dropped to the trap again, twisted and broken like a corpse, and it hit me. It wasn't wearing it. It wasn't caught. It had carried it here, dragged it across God knows how many miles of snow and shadow just to put it at my door. And the only thought pounding in my head was this: it remembered. Not just remembered, it came back because of it. That day months ago, me kneeling in the slush, prying jaws of steel off a tiny bleeding paw. The way those eyes clung to mine like a lifeline, and now here it stood, grown and towering, bringing me the same kind of death I'd saved it from, like a message, or a gift, or both. My breath came out shaky, frosting the glass as I whispered into the silence, You brought this to me." My throat burned. My hands wouldn't stop trembling. And then, without meaning to, the words slipped out. "Thank you, old friend. Old friend. God help me." A grizzly bear on my porch, and I called it that like we were two men sharing whiskey after a long winter. But the truth? It felt right. Because of those eyes. Its eyes. God, those eyes. They weren't wild. Not in that moment. They weren't the black, flat coins of instinct I'd seen in other beasts. They were lit with something I can't explain. Not soft, not tame, not human, but something that saw me, knew me, something that said, "You mattered once, and you matter now." I swallowed hard, every nerve screaming as I forced the next words out. "You can go now," I whispered, voice breaking like a kid's. "Go back to the woods. Be free. You don't owe me anything." And I believed that. I truly did. Because the wild doesn't work on debts. It doesn't keep score. It just is. Savage and beautiful and merciless. That's the rule. But rules don't mean a damn thing when the wild looks at you with gratitude in its eyes. For a heartbeat, I thought it understood. Thought it would turn and vanish into the black trees the way it had before. But it didn't. It stayed. Just stayed. Lowered itself slowly, like a boulder sinking into the snow. Curled those massive paws under its chest, head lifting just enough to keep its eyes on me through the glass. Breathing steady, calm, like it had made a decision, and I wasn't going to change it. My stomach dropped through the floor, because in that second, I realized something I hadn't let myself think until then. This wasn't a visit. This wasn't a passing moment in the night. It was waiting. For what? I couldn't tell. All I knew was that a grizzly, an apex predator, a killer built by God himself, had parked itself on my porch like some silent sentinel. And no part of that made sense. Minutes bled into hours, the clock ticking louder with every heartbeat. I sat in the dark, rifle in reach, eyes glued to that hulking shadow outside. The fire died down to embers, the cold creeping in like fingers. And still, it didn't move, didn't sleep, just watched. By the time the first light of dawn brushed the peaks pink and gold, my nerves were frayed to threads. My whole body ached from sitting rigid in that chair, afraid to blink, afraid to breathe too loud. And still, it stayed. And here's the part that kept me awake long after the sun climbed over the ridge. Somewhere between midnight and morning, the fear started to slip. Not all the way, not gone, but enough for something else to creep in, something colder, heavier, curiosity. because I started asking myself questions I didn't want answers to. Questions like, what danger drags a beast out of its world and plants it at a man's door? What hunts a hunter? And what, in God's name, does it mean when nature comes to guard you? If I'd known what it was waiting for, what this night was really the beginning of, I would have locked every door, barred every window, and prayed harder than I've ever prayed in my life. But it was too late for that. I must have dozed off in the chair because the sound that tore me awake felt like a punch to the chest. A thud, heavy, then another. Then, God help me, a low, guttural snarl that made the walls vibrate. For a second, I thought I was dreaming, until glass rattled in the window and something screamed outside. Not an animal, a man. I shot up, heart clawing at my throat, and stumbled to the window. What I saw out there didn't feel real. The bear, my bear, was on the porch, teeth bared, muscles rippling like a storm under that pelt. And it wasn't alone. 2 men in camouflage, faces half hidden under hoods, rifles in their hands. Poachers, the kind that leave snares in the woods and bullets in whatever breathes too loud. And they were here, on my land. Guns raised at the beast that had come back from some miracle to find me. For half a second, my brain refused to take it in. Then I saw the glint of steel, the barrel flash, and the world exploded. Gunfire split the night like lightning. Splinters jumped from the porch. I heard myself yell, but the sound drowned under the roar that ripped out of the bear's throat, a sound so deep and raw it felt like the earth tearing open. And then it moved. Not away, not into the trees like any sane creature would. No, it charged, straight at the men. They fired again, the crack shattering the silence, and I swear I saw sparks jump off its shoulder. But the beast didn't slow, didn't falter. It hit them like a landslide, rifles clattering into the snow, men screaming. One went down hard, the other scrambled back, face white under the hood. I was frozen, stuck in the doorway, with nothing but my own breath sounding like a freight train in my skull. Until another shot ripped through the dark, too close, too loud, and instinct kicked in. I lunged for the rack, grabbed the shotgun I hadn't fired in years, and slammed 2 shells home with hands that barely felt like mine. My legs carried me out onto the porch before my fear caught up. The cold slapped me awake, snow crunching under boots, the stench of blood, sharp and metallic, twisting in the air. And there they were, one man on his knees, screaming, the other fumbling for a sidearm while the bear loomed over him like some ancient judgment. I didn't think, didn't aim. I just raised the barrel to the sky and fired. The blast shattered the night, echoed off the peaks like thunder. The man dropped the pistol. Both of them scrambled, slipping and cursing, their boots carving chaos into the snow. One ran so hard he fell twice before he vanished into the trees. The other bolted after him without a word. Gone. Silence rushed back in, thick and ringing. My breath poured out in clouds as I lowered the gun, every nerve screaming. And then I saw it. The bear. It stood there, sides heaving, steam curling off its back like smoke. And for a heartbeat, it looked at me. Not them. Me. And I swear, if you strip every word I've ever spoken, every lie, every truth, I'll still never find the language for what was in that stare. It wasn't rage, it wasn't instinct, it was sacrifice. That animal, built by a world that owes nothing to mercy, had put itself between me and death, risked everything for me. My chest cracked wide open right there on that porch, because in that second, I knew what no book, no ranger manual, no lifetime in the mountains had ever taught me. The wild remembers, and sometimes it chooses. For a long moment, the only sound was its breathing, slow, heavy. Then it turned, stepping toward the edge of the porch, and that's when my stomach dropped through the floor. Blood, dark, soaking through the snow where it stood. A trail running down its shoulder, glistening black in the moonlight. I felt my knees go weak. It had taken the bullets meant for me. I stumbled forward, words tumbling out in a whisper. No, 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 no. Like that could change the truth bleeding out in front of me. It looked back once, and God help me, there was no fear in those eyes, no regret, just that same impossible thing that's haunted me ever since. I thought it would limp off into the trees, thought it would vanish the way it came, and I'd never know if it lived or died. But it didn't. It sank down into the snow, slow and silent, until its great head rested on the porch boards like some fallen king. And what I did next, God help me, I still can't believe it. The moment I stepped off that porch, everything in me was screaming, don't do it. Every instinct I'd ever learned out here, the ones that keep men alive in the backcountry, told me I was about to cross a line you don't come back from. But then it moved, or tried to. Its massive body shifted just enough for its head to lift, its eyes locking on mine like twin embers dying in the cold. And I swear, there was no fight left in it, no wild fury, no rage, just trust. It didn't growl when I knelt, didn't flinch when I reached out. My fingers sank into the thick, wet fur at its neck, warm under the slick of blood, and for the first time since it was a cub, I touched it, not as a rescuer, not as some fool playing God in the woods, as a friend. Its breath came in shuddering waves, steaming against my jacket. My voice cracked like dry timber when I whispered, "Easy, I've got you. God help me, I had no plan, no thought beyond don't let it die here." So I did the only thing I could. I hooked my arms under that great head, heaved until my spine felt like it would snap, and dragged what had to be 600 pounds of raw life across the threshold of my cabin. The door slammed behind us, shutting out the night, and for a moment it was like the whole world narrowed to the sound of its breathing and the thud of my own heart. I cleared space by the fire, yanking rugs, shoving chairs, anything to make room for a beast too big for four walls. It sprawled heavy against the planks, the smell of iron thick in the air. Blood seeped into the cracks, a slow, dark river that felt like time running out. My hands were shaking so bad I nearly dropped the lantern, but I lit it anyway, turned the flame up bright, and that's when I saw the wounds. 3 bullet holes, shoulder, flank, 1 grazing the ribs, none clean, all pumping slow, dark streams. I wanted to panic, wanted to curse the world and those men and my own damn stupidity, but there was no time for that. So I did what I'd done before, months ago when it was small enough to fit in my arms, boiled water, tore strips from my own shirts, and worked like a man possessed. Like every second I hesitated was another second its life slipped further away. It didn't fight me, not once, just lay there, chest rising and falling like some great bellows, eyes half-lidded, watching me through a haze of pain. And then, something happened I'll carry to my grave. When I pressed the last bandage to its side, my strength finally broke. I sank down on the floor, back against the wall, head in my hands, and that's when I felt it, weight, warm and heavy, settling against my leg. I looked down, and there it was, this wild thing, this king of the mountains, laying its massive head on my lap like it belonged there. And I swear to you, if the sky had split open and poured fire into that room, I wouldn't have moved, because in that moment, something in me cracked wide open. It laid its head on my lap. Do you know what that feels like? To have a creature of the wild trust you more than its own world? I sat there for hours, hand buried in its fur, whispering nonsense to keep from breaking apart, watching its eyes flutter closed, its breathing slow, until, finally, it slept, and I thought, we made it. It's going to live. God help me, I believe that. I must have drifted too, because the next thing I remember is the pale glow of dawn creeping through the frost on the window, birds calling in the trees, the fire a bed of dying coals, and the space beside me, empty. The rugs, the boards, they were slick with blood, but the bear was gone. I staggered to the door, heart in my throat, eyes burning like fire, and when I stepped out onto the porch, I saw it, a trail. Red drops spattered across the snow, leading into the timberline like a wound through the world. And right then, I knew this wasn't over, not by a long mile. The trail cut through the snow like a wound in the earth. Drops first, small, scattered, then smears, streaking toward the timberline. Every one of them felt like a clock ticking down. I grabbed my coat, my rifle, and stepped off the porch without thinking. The cold bit into me, but I didn't feel it. All I felt was the pounding in my chest and the weight of a truth I didn't want to name. I followed fast, boots crunching, breath smoking in the still air. The forest swallowed me in silence, branches heavy with frost, shadows long and sharp in the early light. The only sound was the whisper of snow under my feet and the thud of my heart in my ears. Every few yards, I'd see another splash of red, dark against the white. And every time, I prayed. Prayed I wasn't too late. Prayed for something I couldn't even put into words. 1/2 mile, maybe more. My legs burned. My lungs clawed for air. But then the trees broke, and I saw it. High above the valley, on the edge of a ridge where the wind tore the clouds to ribbons, stood the bear. For a second, I thought I was seeing a ghost. Its body was ragged with blood, fur matted and black where the bullets tore through. It swayed once, like the wind might take it. But then it steadied, massive and unbroken, head lifting slow in the cold light. And it didn't run, didn't bolt for the trees the way every rule says it should. It just stood there, waiting. I climbed toward it, legs shaking, snow grabbing at my boots. My throat burned raw, and every step felt like walking through a dream I couldn't wake from. When I was close enough to see its eyes, the world fell silent. Those eyes, God, those eyes. I'd seen them once when they were small and afraid, seen them again through the glass when they came back to me out of the dark. But now they were something else. Tired, but not beaten, and behind the pain, something I'll never forget as long as I breathe. Recognition. It didn't snarl, didn't bare its teeth, didn't even flinch. It just looked at me, long, steady, like it was memorizing me the way I'd memorized every scar on its body. And then, it bowed its head, just a fraction, barely a breath of movement. But I swear on everything I am, it was real, not fear, not submission, something older than both, like a goodbye. My knees nearly buckled right there in the snow. My throat closed so hard I couldn't speak. All I managed was a whisper, torn and useless against the wind. Thank you. It held that look for one heartbeat more. Then it turned, slow and sure, and slipped into the pines without a sound. And I never saw it again. Not its shadow, not its prints. Nothing, like the mountain swallowed it whole. But every night after, every time the wind rattles my windows, every time the moon lays silver on the ridge, I feel it. Those eyes, out there in the dark, watching. And if you ask me now if animals remember kindness, I won't give you a speech. I won't quote some book. I'll tell you this. I saw a beast fight men for me. I saw gratitude in a grizzly's eyes. I saw what words can't explain. If you believe animals remember kindness, right, nature never forgets. If your heart just skipped a beat, then you understand. Subscribe, because these are real stories of a world wilder and wiser than we think. When I first saw her, I stopped breathing. A bear, huge, dark, and silent, stood in the middle of the trail, staring straight at me. For a moment, the world froze. No wind, no birds, just her and me. My fingers tightened around the rifle slung across my chest, but I didn't lift it. Something in her eyes held me like chains. She wasn't growling. She wasn't charging. She wasn't even afraid. She was waiting, and then it hit me. She wasn't looking at me like prey. She was looking at me like someone begging for help. My heart slammed so hard I thought I'd hear it echo through the trees. I've hunted for 20 years. I know what a bear looks like when it wants to kill you, and this wasn't it. There was no rage in her stare, no wild hunger, only something I'd never seen in an animal before. Something that made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. I whispered to myself, "What in God's name?" My voice sounded strange in that dead silence. She didn't flinch, didn't move. Her head was low, not in threat, but in... what? Submission? No, not quite. It was like she needed me to understand something. Every instinct screamed at me to back away, turn around, leave, but I couldn't move, because she blinked, slowly, and when her eyes opened again, I swear I saw something that didn't belong in the wilderness. Desperation. I tried to convince myself I was imagining it. Bears don't plead, they don't ask, they take. Everyone knows that. But then she did something that sent chills down my spine. She turned, not quick, not running, just turned her massive body like a shadow sliding across the snow. She took 3 steps down the trail and stopped. Then, like something out of a dream, she looked back over her shoulder, right at me, and in that second, I felt it. She was asking me to follow. I laughed under my breath because what else could I do? The sound cracked in the stillness like glass breaking. Follow a bear? I must have lost my mind. Yet there I was, frozen, staring at her broad back and the way her fur rippled in the fading light. She took another step, slow, heavy, snow crunching under her paws. Then she paused again and looked back. My gut twisted. "What do you want?" I murmured. My voice trembled, and I hated how small it sounded. I don't know what made me take that first step. Curiosity? Instinct? Something older, buried deep, whispering that this wasn't chance. This was something else. But the moment my boots sank into the snow, I swear I saw it. Her ear flicked back, and for a heartbeat, I thought, relief. I gripped the rifle tighter, my breath puffing in sharp clouds. Every nerve in me screamed, this was suicide. If she turned, I'd never have time to raise the gun. Still, I followed. She moved slowly, deliberately, like she wanted to make sure I kept up. Every dozen steps, she'd glance back. Not like a predator stalking its prey, not like a creature warning me off, like a mother checking if her child was still there. That's when the fear started to mix with something else, something that felt a lot like awe. My boots crunched in her tracks, each one the size of a dinner plate. Her shoulders rolled like living mountains, muscles sliding under fur. And yet, I didn't feel hunted. I felt chosen. I shook my head hard, trying to snap out of it. Bears don't choose people. They kill them, tear them apart like paper. But the deeper we went, the more certain I became. She wanted me there. She needed me there. I don't know how long we walked. Minutes? Hours? Time didn't exist. There was only the rhythm of her paws and the pounding in my ears. Finally, she stopped, dead still. My breath caught like a snare. She turned her massive head and locked eyes with me again. And in those eyes, I swear to you, I saw a question, a plea. I opened my mouth, but no sound came out. And then, as if satisfied, she swung her head forward and stepped off the trail, vanishing into the wall of trees. I stood there, heart trying to escape my chest, snow soaking into my boots, every nerve screaming that this was my chance to walk away, to go back to the world where things made sense. I almost did. I almost turned around, but something deep inside whispered, "Not yet." I tightened my grip on the rifle, staring into the darkness where she disappeared, and then I followed. I thought that was it. She'd turn and vanish into the forest, but I couldn't have been more wrong. I stepped off the trail, and the sound of my boots in the snow felt like a gunshot in the silence. Every nerve in my body screamed at me to stop, to turn around, to get the hell out of there. But I didn't. She was ahead of me, moving like a shadow through the trees, slow and deliberate, her massive shoulders swaying with each step. And every few strides, she did it again. Turned her head, eyes catching mine, holding me there, like she was making sure I was still coming. It wasn't a warning, it wasn't a threat, it was something else. She kept glancing back, like a mother checking if her child was keeping up. My breath hung in front of me in ragged clouds. The cold stung my face, but my palms were slick inside my gloves. My finger twitched near the trigger guard. Instinct was screaming, "Don't follow a bear into the forest, ever." But instinct wasn't running the show anymore. Something deeper was, something I couldn't name. The forest swallowed us. Branches clawed at my jacket as I pushed through, boots sinking into drifts. The deeper we went, the darker it got. The light from the trail was gone, and the quiet. God, the quiet was like being underwater. I studied her as we moved. Her body was a wall of muscle, every movement slow and powerful. But her posture, it didn't fit the predator I knew. Her head stayed low. Her ears weren't flat. There was no rage in her shoulders. If anything, she looked tired. And that hit me like a punch. A tired bear is a dangerous bear. But the way she kept looking back, pausing until I caught up, that wasn't aggression. That was patience. I muttered under my breath, "What are you doing?" My voice sounded small, swallowed by the snow and trees. She didn't answer. Of course she didn't. She just turned again and pressed deeper into the woods. Every step felt like stepping off a cliff. Was I insane? Following a predator that could kill me in a heartbeat? Alone, miles from anyone? But the truth burned in my chest. I couldn't stop. Not when every look from her said, "Don't leave me now." My mind twisted with possibilities. Maybe she had a kill stashed somewhere. Maybe she was leading me right to it, waiting for me to drop my guard so she could finish the job. The thought sent a chill down my spine that had nothing to do with the cold. I tightened my grip on the rifle, tried to steady my breathing. Every shadow looked like movement. Every crack of ice underfoot sounded like the start of a charge. My heart was a drum in my ears, pounding so loud I almost missed the sound. The soft crunch of her paws slowing. She stopped, dead still. I froze behind a tree, my chest heaving. The world narrowed to the steam curling from her fur and the silence pressing against my skull. She turned her head again, and for the first time, I saw something I'll never forget. Her mouth was open slightly, her breath coming heavy, like she'd been running for miles. And her eyes, they weren't wild, they weren't cold, they were pleading. I felt my throat tighten. "What is this?" I whispered. She blinked slowly, then turned and kept going. Not fast, not like a hunter, like a guide. And God help me, I followed again. The trees thinned just enough for a pale shaft of winter light to spill across the snow, turning everything silver. And in that light, her tracks looked impossibly big, like the marks of some ancient creature that didn't belong in this world. I kept staring at those tracks, thinking, if I die out here, no one will ever know why. No one would believe me even if I told them. Another turn of her head, another look that pinned me in place, and in that moment, I knew something with absolute certainty. She wasn't leading me to kill me. She was leading me because she needed me. I just didn't know why yet. I thought maybe she was leading me to her kill, and that would be the end of me. But that wasn't it. The farther we went, the heavier the silence became. At first, I thought it was just the forest muffling sound under the snow, but then I realized there was nothing. No birds, no rustle of squirrels, not even the faint whisper of wind through the pines. It felt wrong, like the whole wilderness was holding its breath. Every instinct in me screamed to turn around, go back to the trail, go back to the world where things made sense. But my boots kept moving, crunch after crunch, following the wide paw prints through the white hush. And then I saw it. At first, I thought my eyes were playing tricks on me, a flicker in her movement, barely there. But when she stepped into a patch of pale light, it was clear. She was limping. My heart slammed so hard it hurt. The bear, the massive, terrifying creature I'd been fearing for the last half hour, wasn't whole. Her left hind leg dragged slightly with every step, leaving a shallow groove in the snow. I stopped dead, staring at that mark, at her slow, heavy stride. My breath fogged in front of me as something inside me twisted hard. Fear started to crack, just a little, and something else seeped through the cracks, something I hadn't expected. Pity. That's when it hit me. She wasn't hunting. She was hurting. I gripped the rifle tighter, but not because I was afraid of her anymore, because suddenly I was afraid of what this meant. A wounded bear is dangerous, unpredictable, desperate. She could turn on me in a heartbeat, but she didn't. She kept moving, head low, breath coming in slow, heavy bursts that plumed like smoke in the cold air. Every few steps, she looked back, and when our eyes met this time, I swear to you, it wasn't just a look. It was a question, a plea so sharp it cut straight through me. I whispered, "What happened to you?" My voice cracked like dry wood. She didn't answer, of course, just turned and pushed deeper into the trees, limping like every step cost her. The forest seemed endless now, a maze of white and black and silence. My boots crunched in her tracks as thoughts tore through my head. How did she get hurt? A fight? A trap? A bullet from someone like me? That last thought hit like a punch. I actually stopped and grabbed a tree, steadying myself as my stomach turned. Someone like me. I stared down at my hands gripping the rifle, at the gloves stained with old blood from another hunt, and for a second, I hated myself. Then she turned her head again, and the world narrowed to those eyes, waiting for me. I didn't know what I was doing anymore. I didn't know why I was still following. This was insane, beyond insane. I was deep in the woods with a wounded bear, something you'd only do if you had a death wish. But it didn't feel like death waiting for me up ahead. It felt like something else, something bigger. I kept walking. Branches whipped at my jacket, the cold biting harder as the trees closed in. My breath burned in my throat, and still, the silence hung thick, pressing against my ears. No life, no sound, just me and her, two creatures stumbling through the frozen world for reasons I couldn't explain. Finally, she slowed, stopped. I froze too, chest heaving, sweat prickling under my clothes despite the cold. She stood there, a dark shape against the pale snow, sides rising and falling with heavy breaths. Then she turned her head, not quick, not sharp, but slow, deliberate. And that look, God help me, that look almost brought me to my knees. There was no wildness in it, no rage, only pain, and something else, something I couldn't name but felt in my bones. I almost turned back. Almost. I even took a step, felt the pull of survival tugging me hard, but then I saw what she wanted me to see. We broke through a tangle of spruce, and suddenly, the forest opened up into a small clearing. The snow here was untouched, a pale sheet of silence under a sky the color of steel. My boots sank deep as I stepped forward, breath burning in my lungs. That's when I heard it, faint, fragile, a sound that didn't belong out here in the frozen stillness. At first, I thought it was wind whistling through the branches, but then it came again, thin, high-pitched, like a squeal smothered by snow, a cry. My blood went cold. My eyes swept the clearing, heart hammering like a war drum. And then I saw it. Just beyond the center of the clearing, a massive tree lay splintered and half buried in white, its roots torn from the earth like broken ribs. At its base, the snow was churned, clawed through with frantic marks, and sticking out from under the shattered trunk. A paw, small, fur matted with ice, barely moving. I sucked in a breath so hard it cut my throat. It wasn't a piece of prey. It wasn't a carcass. It was a cub. Trapped. The sound came again, weaker this time, a muffled whimper under the weight of the fallen tree. Oh, God. The words tumbled out of me, raw, useless in the dead air. I turned, and that's when I saw her. The bear. The mother. She had stopped just a few feet away from the tree and lowered herself to the ground. Not charging, not warning me off, just waiting. And when her eyes found mine, the bottom dropped out of my world. She looked at me like a mother handing her child to a stranger. Every hair on my body stood on end. My pulse pounded in my ears as I stared back at her, my breath coming in ragged clouds. If she wanted me dead, this was it. One swipe, one lunge, and I'd be nothing but blood on snow. But she didn't move. She stayed there, massive and still, her breath rising in soft plumes, her eyes locked on mine with something that made my throat close. Not hunger, not rage, something closer to trust. The rifle felt heavy across my back, suddenly obscene in my hands. I let it slide off my shoulder and drop into the snow. The sound was like a gunshot in the silence, and I flinched, but she didn't. Not even a twitch. Slowly, so slowly it felt like moving through water. I stepped toward the fallen tree. My boots sank deep, every crunch of snow like thunder in my skull. The cub's tiny paw flexed once, a feeble twitch, then stilled again. My hands were shaking so bad I could barely pull my gloves off. My breath tore out in clouds as I dropped to my knees beside the trunk. The cold bit hard, but I barely felt it. The tree was huge, too heavy to move, but maybe I could free enough of the branches. My fingers closed around the nearest limb, splintered and sharp, and I yanked hard. Bark shredded my palms as it gave with a crack. The cub whimpered, a sound so faint it almost broke me in half. Behind me, I heard the mother exhale, a deep, rumbling sound that vibrated in my bones. I froze, heart slamming, sure that was the end, but when I turned my head, she was still lying there, still watching. Her eyes weren't wild, they weren't cold, they were something I never thought I'd see in a creature like her. Hope. I ripped another branch loose, teeth clenched so hard my jaw ached. Snow and bark showered my face, but I didn't care. I clawed like a madman, adrenaline drowning out the cold, the fear, everything. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, I cleared enough to see the cub's head, eyes squeezed shut, tiny muzzle flecked with frost. Still alive. Barely. I slid my arms under its little body, muscles screaming as I pried it free from the weight of the wood. It came loose with a sucking sound, a choked cry bursting from its throat as I lifted it into the light. For a second, I just knelt there, clutching this trembling scrap of life, breath ragged in the frozen air. And then I looked up. The mother rose to her feet in one slow, silent motion. She didn't roar. She didn't charge. She just stepped forward, each movement like rolling thunder through the snow. My chest locked. My arms tightened around the cub. If this was how it ended, at least it would end with the little one out of the trap. But she didn't attack. She stopped just a breath away from me. And then, soft as a prayer, she lowered her head. I thought freeing the cub would be the end of it. I had no idea what this would lead to. The cub was wedged tight, its tiny ribs heaving under the weight of the fallen tree. I'd managed to pull away some of the smaller branches, but the trunk itself was a monster, too heavy to move without tools. My hands were raw and trembling, blood pricking where bark had torn skin through my gloves. I fumbled for the hatchet on my belt, fingers clumsy from cold and adrenaline. The metal burned against my skin as I gripped the handle. Behind me, the mother shifted. Just a single step, the crunch of snow like thunder. I froze, heart hammering against my ribs. Every instinct told me to run, but then I heard it. That sound, a low rumble, not a growl, not a threat. Something softer, almost impatient. I risked a glance. She wasn't coming at me, She wasn't even snarling. She was pacing, slow arcs in the snow, her massive head swinging back toward the cub every few seconds. Every line of her body screamed tension, not anger, but desperation. And that's when it hit me. Every swing of my axe, I could feel her eyes burning into my soul, not with rage, but with hope. The weight of that crushed me harder than fear ever could. She was trusting me with the only thing in this world that mattered to her. And God help me, I couldn't fail. I wedged the axe against the first thick limb and swung hard. The crack of wood split the silence, and the cub whimpered, a sharp cry that punched straight through my chest. "Easy," I muttered, voice shaking as much as my hands. "Hang on, little one, just hang on." Behind me, snow crunched again, closer this time. My breath caught, but I didn't dare look. If I saw her standing over me, jaws inches from my neck, I'd lose it completely. I swung again, and again. Splinters exploded into the air, dusting the snow like shards of bone. My arms burned, my gloves slick with sweat despite the freezing cold. The cub cried louder now, a thin, desperate wail that cut through the stillness like a blade. Every sound was a countdown, a clock ticking towards something I didn't want to imagine. Finally, the branch cracked and gave way. I yanked it free, tossing it aside, and went for the next one, teeth gritted so hard my jaw ached. Each swing was agony, my muscles screaming, my breath tearing out in clouds. But I didn't stop, couldn't stop, because behind me, she was watching, and somehow that mattered more than my own life. The next branch broke, then the next. My hands felt like meat, my shoulders like fire. I lost track of how many I cut, how many times the axe bit into wood and bounced back with a shock that rattled my bones. And then, the last branch gave way with a groan, splitting in two and tumbling into the snow. For a moment, nothing happened. Just silence, just the cold air burning in my lungs and the wild, frantic pounding of my heart. Then the cub moved. It wriggled free, paws scrabbling against the snow as it dragged itself out from the tangle of wood. Its tiny body shook like a leaf in the wind, eyes blinking against the light. Alive. By some miracle, it was alive. A sound tore from my throat, a laugh, or maybe a sob. I couldn't tell. My vision blurred as I reached down and scooped the cub up in my arms, clutching it against my chest. It was lighter than I expected, its fur stiff with frost, its heartbeat a rapid flutter against my palms. I turned, slow, terrified of what I'd see, and there she was. The mother bear had stopped pacing. She was standing motionless, towering and terrible and magnificent, her breath rolling in slow clouds, and her eyes, God, those eyes, were fixed on me, on the tiny life trembling in my arms. For a second, we just stared at each other, two creatures from different worlds, locked in a moment that felt like the center of the universe. Then I bent down, heart in my throat, and set the cub gently in the snow. It tottered once, then stumbled forward on shaky legs, squeaking as it reached her. She lowered her head, nudging the little one close, pulling it into the thick curtain of her fur. A low sound rumbled from her chest, not a growl, but something softer, something like relief. I sagged back on my heels, muscles trembling, breath tearing out in clouds. Every part of me screamed that this was it, that she'd take her cub and disappear into the trees. I thought she'd take her cub and disappear, but that's not what happened. The cub stumbled through the snow like a drunk, squeaking softly as it wobbled toward her massive frame. She bent down, nose brushing its tiny body with a gentleness that didn't seem possible from something so powerful. She nuzzled it close, checked every inch, then let out a low, rumbling sound that almost sounded like a sigh. I should have felt relief. I should have turned around right then and there, thanked whatever force had kept me alive, and gotten the hell out. But I couldn't move. I just stood there, knees buried in snow, staring like an idiot while the mother bear curled herself around her cub like a living fortress. It was a picture of love so raw, so primal, It punched straight through my chest, and then she looked at me. Not a quick glance, not a warning glare, a look that held me where I knelt like chains. Her eyes found mine, and something in them shifted. She gave the cub one last nudge, then turned, slowly, with a grace that didn't belong in a body that big, and started walking toward me. My heart stopped, literally stopped. My chest locked so tight it hurt. Every survival instinct I had roared awake in an instant. Move, run, do something. But I couldn't. My body wouldn't listen. The snow crunched under her paws, deep and deliberate, as she closed the distance between us. Each step felt like the toll of a bell, counting down the last seconds of my life. 20 feet, 10, 5. She was close enough now that I could see the frost clinging to her fur, the scars etched across her muzzle, the rise and fall of her massive chest. Her breath rolled over me in hot clouds that smelled of earth and pine. I was shaking so hard my teeth chattered. My hands twitched toward the rifle lying in the snow, but I didn't reach for it. Somehow, deep down, I knew, if I did, it would all shatter. She stopped, right in front of me. For one breathless, endless moment, the world held still. Just me, her, and the silent woods pressing in like a cathedral of ice. And then, she lowered her head, not to strike, not to bite. She lowered her head to the ground, so slow, so deliberate, it stole the air from my lungs. She bowed. A wild bear bowed to me. I stared, frozen, my pulse pounding like a war drum in my ears. I didn't understand. I couldn't understand. My throat burned, and before I knew it, tears were spilling hot down my frozen face, because in that single gesture, everything inside me broke. Every wall I'd ever built, every story I'd ever told myself about what wild animals are, gone, shattered like glass under a hammer. This wasn't instinct. This wasn't randomness. This was something else, something bigger than me, bigger than words. She held the bow for what felt like forever, and then, slowly, she lifted her head. Her eyes met mine one last time, and in them I saw something I'll never forget for as long as I live. Gratitude, not the human kind, something purer, older, something that didn't need language because it was older than language itself. And then she turned. I watched in a daze as she nosed the cub forward, her massive body wrapping protectively around the little one as they moved toward the trees. Their tracks etched a winding path through the snow, growing fainter with each step until the forest swallowed them whole. I sat there, shaking, tears freezing on my face, feeling like I'd touched the edge of some impossible truth, like the world had cracked open just enough to show me what lay behind the curtain. I thought that was the last time I'd see her, but nature had one more miracle. I don't remember how long I sat there after they vanished. Minutes? Hours? My legs were numb, my hands raw, and still I couldn't move. The clearing felt sacred, like I'd stepped into something I wasn't supposed to see. Finally, I forced myself to stand, slinging the rifle over my shoulder. My body felt like lead as I started back toward the trail, each step heavy in the snow. That's when I heard it, a faint crunch behind me, then another. I froze, heart lurching into my throat. Slowly, I turned and felt the world tilt. She was there, the mother bear, not charging, not even tense, just standing at the edge of the trees, her dark shape carved against the white. Her breath curled in clouds, eyes locked on me. I should have been terrified, but I wasn't. For the first time since this started, I felt safe. She stepped forward, snow collapsing under her paws with a soft hiss. My muscles tensed out of habit, but the fear didn't come. Instead, something strange swelled in my chest, a quiet, steady trust that made no sense at all. She turned, slow and deliberate, then glanced back. That same look, the one that had pulled me off the trail, dragged me into her world, and without thinking, I followed. We moved through the trees, the forest swallowing us again. Shadows stretched long across the snow, the last light bleeding out of the sky. My boots crunched in her tracks as the cold bit deeper, but I barely felt it. I didn't ask myself why anymore. I didn't fight it. Something bigger than reason was moving my feet now. Finally, the trees thinned, and we stepped out onto a frozen river. The ice was a mirror, cracked in places, dusted with powdery snow, and there, near the far bank, lay a shape that made my breath catch. An elk, a big one. Its body sprawled on the ice, blood pooling in a dark halo against the white. Fresh kill. My stomach tightened as a dozen thoughts tore through my head. Was this hers? Was she leading me to it? Why? I stopped dead as she padded to the carcass. She stood over it for a moment, her massive frame dwarfing the fallen elk. Then, so slow I almost missed it, she stepped aside and looked at me. Not a warning look, not a glare, something else. It was like she was saying, "Thank you," like words, but stronger. I stood there, breath snagged in my chest, staring at her against that pale, endless sheet of ice. The kill at her feet, the cub somewhere safe behind us, and me, a man who'd come out here to hunt, frozen in a moment I couldn't explain if I lived 100 years. My throat burned, my eyes stung, because it hit me like a hammer. This wasn't random. This wasn't instinct. This was a gift from a creature that owed me nothing. I wanted to speak, to tell her I understood, that I didn't need anything, that what I'd been given already was bigger than any prize I'd ever dreamed of. But no sound came out. Only a raw, aching silence as tears blurred the edges of the world. We stood like that for what felt like forever, two beings from opposite worlds, bound together by something deeper than fear or hunger, something older than words. Finally, she turned. No rush, no sound but the soft hiss of snow as her paws slid across the ice. She didn't look back this time. She didn't need to. I thought I understood what happened, that she was saying thank you in the only way she could. But then came the part I'll never forget. I thought it was over when she turned her back on me at the river. I thought that was the last thread of whatever strange bond had tied us together. But I was wrong. She didn't vanish into the trees. Not yet. I saw movement behind her, a small, dark shape against the snow. The cub, limping slightly, but alive, whole. It tottered forward on wobbly legs, and she slowed, glancing back as if to make sure I saw. And then, God help me, she did something I still can't explain. She stopped, lowered her massive head, and with a gentle push of her muzzle, she nudged the cub toward me. I froze. Every nerve in my body screamed, "Don't move. Don't even breathe." But the cub came closer, its tiny paws crunching in the snow, leaving a trail of fragile prints that looked like punctuation marks in the white silence. It stopped right in front of me, so close I could see the frost clinging to its whiskers, the way its fur spiked in the cold. It tilted its head, curious, unafraid, and then, slowly, almost like it had all the time in the world, it sniffed the toe of my boot. Something broke inside me. I sank to my knees without thinking, breath coming in ragged clouds, eyes burning so hot tears froze on my lashes. My hand twitched like it wanted to reach out, but I didn't. Some part of me knew this moment wasn't mine to take. It was a gift. The cub blinked at me once, dark eyes shining like 2 drops of night, and then turned, wobbling back toward the shadow of its mother. And the strangest thing? She waited. She let it happen, like she was introducing us. My throat closed so tight it hurt. The only words that would come were a whisper, cracked and raw. "Go. Just go." She seemed to hear me, or maybe she didn't need to. She lowered her head again, curling it gently around the cub as it pressed against her side, and for a long, breathless moment, we just stood there, 3 souls in the middle of a frozen wilderness, bound by something I couldn't name but could feel in every bone. Then she turned. No rush, no sound but the soft drag of her paws through the snow. The cub followed close, its tiny body dwarfed by the shadow of her frame. Step by step, they moved away from me, farther and farther, until the trees swallowed them whole. And then they were gone. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was heavy, sacred, like the whole forest was holding its breath, like I'd touched something eternal and the world would never look the same again. I just stood there, staring at the place where they disappeared, until the cold bit through to my bones and I realized my legs were shaking so bad I could barely stay upright. Finally, I turned and started back. Every step felt unreal, like I was walking out of a dream I'd never wanted to wake from. My rifle lay forgotten across my back, nothing but dead weight now. The man who had stepped into these woods that morning, the hunter, was gone. Because that day, I didn't take a life. I gave one back, and for that, I'd been given something I still don't have words for. As they walked away, the forest felt holy, like I had touched something eternal. I thought I'd never see her again, but nature had its own plans. Winter came back harder than anyone expected, the kind of winter that swallows sound, where the air bites deep and the snow crunches like broken glass under your boots. For months, I stayed away from that trail. Not because I didn't want to go, God knows I did, but because some things feel too sacred to disturb. But one morning, late in the season, something pulled me back. Call it instinct, call it madness, call it whatever you want. All I know is, I strapped on my pack, slung the same rifle over my shoulder, and started down that path again. The woods hadn't changed. Same towering pines, same silence thick enough to make your ears ring. My boots traced the same line through the snow, but I wasn't the same man who had walked it before. The hunter in me was gone, left somewhere in that clearing months ago. I reached the river by mid-afternoon. The ice was thick, a silver sheet stretching under a pale sky. Wind slid across its surface with a soft hiss, and for a long time, there was nothing, just me, the breath tearing from my lungs, and the endless hush of winter. And then, I saw her. At first, I thought it was a shadow, a trick of the light, but then it moved. A shape at the far bank, dark against the white, too big to be anything else, the bear. She stood there, massive and still, framed by the black skeletons of the trees. For a moment, the world narrowed to her and me, two specks in the endless wilderness. My throat closed. My legs felt like they'd turned to stone. Then another shape stepped out from behind her, smaller, leaner, moving with the awkward confidence of youth. The cub, grown now, no longer a scrap of life trapped under a tree, but a young bear, strong and steady. My chest tightened so hard it hurt. I couldn't breathe, couldn't move. She didn't come closer, didn't growl, didn't make a sound. She just stood there, the wind stirring the fur along her shoulders, and stared across the frozen river. And then, so slow I almost didn't catch it, she lifted her head. Not high, not sharp, just enough. A small, deliberate motion that spoke louder than any sound I'd ever heard. It wasn't just an animal. It was a mother saying, "I remember." That was it. That tiny gesture shattered me. My knees buckled, and before I knew it, I was down in the snow, hands buried in the cold, tears freezing on my face faster than I could wipe them away. I didn't care. I couldn't stop. I sobbed like a child in the middle of the silent woods, because somehow that wild creature had reached inside me and pulled out everything I didn't know I was carrying. For a long time, we stayed like that, me kneeling in the snow, her standing proud and still on the far bank, the cub pressed close to her side. Two worlds divided by ice, bound by something deeper than words. And then, just as slow as before, she turned. The cub followed, its paws leaving small tracks alongside hers as they slipped back into the shadow of the trees. I watched until they vanished, until the forest swallowed them whole. The silence came rushing back, heavy as the falling snow, and I knew I'd never see her again. Not like that. Maybe not ever. But I didn't need to, because some things don't fade. Some moments carve themselves into your bones, burn themselves into your blood, and that day, on a frozen river under a steel gray sky, a bear taught me something no human ever could. If I hadn't seen it with my own eyes, I'd never believe it. But I did, and I'll never be the same. If you believe animals remember kindness, right, nature never forgets.